Hello. So this is probably getting easier actually because my last video had like one view. So I'm not expecting this video to be seen by too many people. But the plan today is to do a slightly longer format video. Just get used to talking a little bit more on camera. Um, Today, the intention is to talk a little bit about like self-help and stuff like that, because obviously I'm doing these videos because like with the end goal in mind of getting better at speaking on camera, so I can make content for my own business, which is teaching yoga and jiu-jitsu and breath work and things like that. So yeah, the whole theme of self-help, it can be a little bit of a contentious one. I started reading this book today, which is Paul McKenna, Change Your Life in 7 Days, which is like one of the, probably like, if you had to list some cheesy kind of self-help genre, it would be like a hypnotherapist writing a book about, with some really dramatic claim about changing your life in 7 days. And to be honest, I always used to be really skeptical about these sorts of things for a long time, when I was younger. And I would always pass it by as being like, it sounds like a load of bullshit, it's not really possible. And I went down the path of philosophy, in particular got into the Eastern philosophy, started getting a lot into the yoga philosophy and Vedanta and things like that. Buddhism really appealed to me, Taoism, all these kinds of things. I really enjoyed the like academic side of it, I guess you would say, but like technical philosophical side of things. Found that really interesting, and really absorbed myself in a lot of scripture, I guess you would call it, but like translations of things that were made easy for people without maybe a good prior knowledge of Sanskrit or Chinese or anything like that, sort of Eastern philosophy for a Western audience. And more I started to come around to the realization that a lot of these things that I used to think that were like Western pop psychology, that seemed a little bit like bullshit, that you just change your mind, change your life, all that kind of thing, is really tapping into something that is very much aligned with what they would call the perennial philosophy, I guess. It was a term that I came across. There's an Aldous Huxley book called The Perennial Philosophy, and I think he took it from Blaise Pascal, if I'm not mistaken, someone like that anyway, that came up with this term about like all of the major religions have this thread running amongst them that kind of alludes to the same thing. Very similar themes about like, we are God deep down, stuff like that, which again can sound very much like bullshit, because basically semantics, depending on what your definition of God is, you can say God definitely doesn't exist. You can also say like God definitely does exist. I always use this argument. It's like, I don't really care what you call it. Like sometimes you have a useful term for something where it's like, all of the universe is God, or if I say that everything that can possibly exist and does exist is what I call God, it's very difficult for somebody to argue against that. Like you can't say, well, you can say nothing exists, but then you're getting into a whole world of like say confusing philosophy, just arguing about words really, which is fun, Don't get me wrong, like I do enjoy doing all that kind of thing as well. But at the end of the day, like it's not really practical. Like it doesn't really help you out of a bad situation, because this is why I came to all this philosophy stuff, is dealing with depression mainly, just struggling to get going in life and do things, and really getting to the point where I was like, I've got to figure this out. I've got to figure out like how to enjoy life, because for all my like wanting to enjoy material things and like spending money, traveling places, doing interesting things, like partying, doing whatever, I was really struggling with maybe anhedonia is what you would call it, in like a diagnostic term, but just struggling to find meaning in life, struggling to find enjoyment in things. And so I am like really turned on, I guess, by like problem solving. Like I enjoy trying to figure things out, and so that became the challenge, was like to figure myself out. Eastern philosophy definitely presented like a really useful framework for me to start doing those kind of things. Also, like Jungian psychology, I found really engaging, really interesting, and philosophy in general, like East, West, it doesn't really matter. Like the best kind of philosophy is really engaging to get your teeth into, if you don't mind a lot of fancy words. But yeah, again, at the end of the day, all the books I was reading, everything that I was doing, didn't really lead me to like feeling like my life was getting any better, or feeling like my mental health was getting any better, until I started getting into more of the Buddhism stuff and yoga, and having some like practical things that I could do on a daily basis, and having some experience of doing things like breath work, and then having like a physical sensation of like, I can change my mind by doing something physical. I can change my mind by just working with the breath, or sitting meditating and things like that. Early on when I was meditating, I had a really interesting experience, which like gave me a little taste of it that was like, wow, I want some more of that. And so I went down like say maybe what you would call an Eastern path, because I was never raised with any sort of deep Christian roots, so I didn't have like culturally any sort of attachment to some sort of contemplative tradition, and the Eastern stuff is like, seems a lot cooler. It was a lot more accessible. There's a lot more books written about it, and that was what engaged me the most. And like I say, after a little while on that path, I started to look back at things that were. I remember my dad got me a book once that was called The Magic of Thinking Big. And me and my brothers at the time, like, he got us all the same book, and we were like, what's this all about? And then I read it like maybe 5-10 years later even. And I was like, oh yeah, okay, like this makes sense now. Like if you do some sort of visualization practices and things like that, it can help in terms of making you better at sport or something like that, but also it's really important for just habits in general. I think there's a quote in Buddhism: with our thoughts we make the world. And again, like Shakespeare said the same thing back in the day. There is nothing good or bad, only thinking makes it so. All these things that sound too simple, really, I think are how our reality is made. Without getting too much into the science, but like quantum physics and things like that these days, a lot of more forward-thinking scientists do start to touch on these topics where it's like the observer effect and stuff like that actually does make a difference in terms of how your reality unfolds. And so to relate that to like the yoga tradition, talking about habits, this is kind of what karma is all about. Like, it's the sort of sum total of your reality is what you've been doing and what you've been creating, and like your ancestors and like society around you and things like this. It's all this kind of interweaving of all these habitual patterns that are going on that lead to like your current situation. Like who you are as a person right here, right now, is a collection of habits. And so like intellectually I know this, and I know that like in my better times I have like kept up with really good habits and it has a really positive effect on my life. But it's also easy to slip it like out of habits and back into habits that don't necessarily produce like beneficial effects for your life. So as easy as it can be to be like, oh yeah, understand that, completed that, like I do this, I do that for my practice. If you're not careful, like, and this happens a lot with diet and things like that, if you're not careful, it's easy to just start thinking, oh, you know what, I'm in good shape, I'm training a lot, I can eat a little bit of cake here and there. Then you start getting a taste for it again, and then it's like, oh yeah, no, cake here, cake there, a few biscuits, a few this, a few that, because you say to yourself like, oh, you know, I need to you know, put on some kilos of muscle, I've got to build I've got to increase my calories, or I want to get stronger, I want to get this, I want to get that. And you can get into the habit really easily that then gets hard to break again. But at the end of the day, like I said, it's all just habits. And so if at any point you find yourself in a situation where you're not enjoying what life is presenting you, like how your life is going, I think it can be useful to look at some of these self-help books that talk about like changing habits in order to be able to start living the life that you want to live. And again, it all sounds so cliche, so cheesy, like I don't know what the secret is really to taking somebody from a position of skepticism to a position of really accepting that no matter how shit you feel, there is a, let's call it a simple solution, even though it's not easy. You know, things like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, can be super effective for people, but it's hard to get in the habit sometimes, unless you have somebody who like really inspires you to be able to like say, you know what, I believe this person and I believe in this thing that they're showing me. So if you've got a really like great sympathetic doctor that you went to see maybe when you were struggling, like that can be like super effective, super powerful to get you into a better place. I think I struggled going through the whole medical arena, just because especially like 15 years ago now, they really didn't cope well with somebody who wasn't like suicidal but was struggling with deep depression. It was like, well, here's some pills, maybe you could go get some therapy somewhere, but we don't offer it, so good luck with that. and then you kind of think like, take some pills for a little bit, you feel a little bit better, and then you're like, oh yeah, maybe I'll just crack on, do something else, distract myself, try and, oh, it's this that's really the problem, I'm going to try and get a better job or whatever it might be. And that works for a little bit, you change your habits for a little bit, but then old things resurface and you blah 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 blah, fall back into, you know, feeling like shit again. But the reason why I'm going to bring it back to this Paul McKenna book is because, like, I was never raised in any kind of religious tradition, so I don't have like that to fall back on as something where it's like, yeah, I can call on Jesus or the Buddha or God or whatever. But, and I was thinking this today, like, why was I drawn to a book like this that I picked up literally like charity bookshelf for £1? Just like, right, I need some inspiration at the moment, so that'll do. But I think genuinely it can be really effective, because I grew up watching a lot of TV, and so as a kid, like, I'm indoctrinated in like seeing someone like Paul McKenna come on TV and everybody saying, this guy is a hypnotherapist and he hypnotizes people to like make their lives different, better, I don't know, peck around on stage like a chicken or whatever sort of like clever parlor tricks that he used to use on TV. So there's some aspect in me that's been conditioned to believe that this guy can hypnotize people. And so I use that as an example of, like, for some people this book would never work. For some people this book would be like absolutely amazing for. For some people religion's going to be like amazing for. And there are aspects to all of these kinds of things that everybody can benefit from as well. Like, there's no doubt that I also benefit a lot from like physical exercise, like meditative practice, breath work, all these kinds of things, but there's no need to necessarily like discount anything or just say, well, I'm going to go down just this path. For some people that's great, and at some point you might get to a junction where you're like, I've got to make a choice here. I'm either going to go down this path or go down this path, and you want to stick with it. But also I think there's a lot of value sometimes in being a generalist or being a syncretist. Not necessarily like just changing, like, oh, I'm going to go down this path for a while and then no, I'm going to go in a complete right angle and go down this one. Like, that can be the temptation sometimes, think this isn't working, I want to try something else. I see it as like a cumulative process rather than discarding things that you've picked up along the way, because even if you find that something isn't necessarily for you, I think a lot of the times it's like good feedback, it's good data to go forward and be like, oh, it's interesting that I've come across it, I've taken what I can from it, and now I can let it go and move on to something else. But yeah, there's definitely something that keeps drawing me back to like a self-help genre. And I think really what the benefit is like I say, just that forming good habits. As annoying as basic as that sounds, good habits are what lead to a good life. Anyway, this video is probably a bit longer than I expected. I'm running out of steam a little bit, but yeah, like I said, the intention was to do a slightly longer format video here, and I think I feed more off like having questions and being in dialogue with someone or something. So if anybody does see this, has any questions, comments, observations, yeah, love to hear it. and it helped me in future to be able to have a few things where I'm like, oh, somebody's talking about this, somebody's talking about this, and then being able to riff on that to make some hopefully more engaging content and more interesting content. Because whilst, like I say, it's kind of nice at the moment to not have any views, to make me a bit more relaxed about making the video. You know, ultimately, hopefully, I could get some useful and engaging content out there, that puts something good out in the world. But yeah, thanks for listening, if anybody did.